I was gonna say, I had a whole spiel prepared, but I was gonna say that we talked before this. You did tell me about your like your career. You told me about starting early. You told me about having a few exits with startups.
Yep.
Been programming ever since you were a teenager and all that. But I was wondering more about some of the recent stuff that you've been focusing on. First thing is, this is very recent. I saw it on LinkedIn just before we started recording, which is you started a position in AlphaSense. Could
Yeah.
you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I moved over as a CISO over at AlphaSense. They like to call themselves the technology behind the business world's most important decisions, and they're kind of like an AI search and market intelligence platform. They really let you get all that information right at your fingertips in a meaningful way, and also a way that's like non-hallucinatory and weighted by like importance and significance.
Hmm.
Um, and For me, I think, look, I've been working in big data and ML, what we called AI, up until 2, 3 years
Last
ago.
year, yeah.
Going back to 2012, I started get kind of putting my toes in and doing stuff back when I was at Ameritrade and moving on from there. And I think look, it's obviously the future, but I think like we're defining what the future is. And I think that was an exciting part of being at Own before that. And that was an exciting part too. People don't realize that at Clear, it was a lot of biometric AI that we were doing and a lot
Hmm.
of identity proofing artificial intelligence. So I think, or what we now call artificial intelligence, but again, we were calling it machine learning back then.
Yeah.
So I think we're at the point where this is about to explode. And I think that it's exciting, but I also feel like if we do it wrong, this is something that is a really interesting footnote in history and will get regulated away. Right.
Right.
And will be something we can't do. Right. And it's like everyone remembers Dolly the sheep, and cloning was really interesting for a hot minute. And there's things that have offshot from that. But we also, people came in really quickly and were like, no, 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 we're not doing that. Right. And I think that's because it was kind of done roguely and people didn't understand the outcomes. And I think we're defining those outcomes. And if we can define those outcomes to be secure and privacy oriented and helpful and ethical, then AI will become a daily part of your life. Right.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that it's going to be critical moving forward um, as we progress, not just in business, but in literally every profession,
Right.
how we utilize AI. And I think that's the important thing too. I think people think of AI as this, it's going to replace us.
Right.
It's not going to replace us. It's going to be a part of us and how we work and operate. People thought computers would replace
Yeah. Right.
people. People thought machines would replace people during the industrial revolution.
Yeah.
People are still working. People still have jobs. People have not been supplanted as people, right?
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere. But I think
Hmm.
figuring out how we intertwine with this new technology is really important.
Hmm. Now, looking at this from a CISO perspective, what would you say stepping into a CISO role with a company that's so heavily focused on AI?
Yeah.
What makes that different? Would you say?
I think it's the pace. I think CISOs always have to kind of live on the bleeding edge because that's where at least your non-lazy hackers live, right? They're researchers and they're figuring things out and figuring out how to break the things that we're building. So we have to understand what we're building and what we're using. I think the biggest challenge here is the literal pace of change, and I think um, unlike any other change we've been through before, historically, I think we are going to see a blistering pace of change here, and I think it's going to be about figuring out. Obviously, there's a lot of benefit to that, and the fact that we can like roll these things out and adopt quickly. But I think on the other side, it's going to be about How do we wrap our arms around that and make sure that we can kind of hold on to that blistering pace of change and make sure that we're securing the things as we go.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's a wild thing that uh, there's technology and AI that no one was even talking about in January that's now being widely adopted in June, right? Right? And you're like, that's a 6 month
Yeah.
or less cycle. And that's really fast, right?
Yeah.
That's breaking Moore's law, like way, I don't, exponentially, right?
Yeah. 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 You mentioned identity proofing as something that you were focusing on heavily in the past.
Yeah,
This is something like you talked about the ML days.
yeah,
Um, huge breakthroughs in that, right? And
yeah.
a lot of adoption also a few years ago. What do you think is the future of identity proofing and the way it works, and what are you seeing down the road?
I think it's where it was driving prior to AI's explosion, and I think now it's just leaning and tilting harder into that direction. Is like
Hmm.
we knew 5 years ago that identity proofing had to be a multimodal process. The government kind of even knew that. They had very clunky documentation around that, but we knew that to really defeat fraud and understand that you are actually you, that it's not enough just to look at facial comparisons, other biometrics, certain identity markers and databases, but you have to actually look at identity proofing is a lot about certainty, right?
Hmm.
You are or you aren't, and so how do you take something that is probabilistic and drive it towards something deterministic?
Hmm.
And you do that by adding in more features and factors, but they have to be of different modalities, right? And I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
that's the most important thing, and I think that's honestly ironically, where I think we're going to see the biggest boon in AI. We're starting to get in that
Hmm.
direction with agents and subagents and collaborative reasoning that's occurring through those. But keep in mind, a lot of that collaborative reasoning is still agents of the same modality. I think when we start getting into kind of multimodal agents that are using different modalities and different algorithms under the hood, to then contribute to like a probabilistic, possibly adversarial collaboration, that's where you're going to start pushing towards like truly deterministic, eradicating hallucinations, reducing false positives and false negatives, and actually getting towards um, uh, predictive outcomes that are probabilistic but are almost as good as expert deterministic outcomes, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's what's really important, right? And that's the thing too, is I think that people um, biometrics are kind of like the the perfect way to actually explain to people kind of how AI works under the hood and tuning.
Hmm.
And the fact is, like, when you do facial recognition, right? This is a layman's explanation. There's a lot more involved with like depth of field and everything else. But the most basic thing is like there are certain feature points on
Hmm.
your face that are generally unique to a person. And you take all of those and you add those up. Now, the thing is, there is a curve, right, between false positive and false negative, and you want to hit in a point where you're going to match people most often with a certain level of accuracy, but you're always going to have some level of false positive, false negative. In really layman's terms, it's about like if the dots are here on my eyebrows, right, and the dots are here, how big can the circles that those dots need to fit in be, right?
Hmm.
That's what
Hmm.
we're tuning. And
Hmm.
at a certain point, those circles start overlapping with each other so they become meaningless, right? And it's
Hmm.
like and so um that is like tuning that occurs with like feature tuning in pretty much all AI that occurs, right?
Hmm.
And so again, that goes to that, like, how is the system trained and how can it adopt to the information, and adapt itself to the information that's given, and how can we start using multi modal AI probably in a more adversarial than collaborative fashion to say, hey, these circles are in fact too big. We can't trust this part. We need to go look at something else. We need to go to depth of field. We need to go look at some other set of features to determine this, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's part of the problem. Is I think that, or I won't say problem, but part of what is occurring right now is there is wide adoption of a technology
Hmm.
with very limited understanding. And that's even from people who are utilizing and making, I put in quotes, making, but let's say recommoditizing that technology. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, right. It's possible to write an AI program without understanding
What?
what the AI program is doing under
Yeah.
the hood and how
Yeah.
you're getting the outcomes, and just say, but I'm getting the outcomes I want. And
Yeah.
that's where danger
Well,
lives.
I guess a lot of the, like, if we go back to the identity proofing part,
Yeah.
a lot of the um, startups or the new companies that came up with a new identity proofing, remote identity proofing
Yeah.
services, a lot of them use the same core engines, right? It wasn't like
Yes.
everyone made their
Correct.
own engine, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about here is like
Yes.
we're all actually using this thing that we know it works somehow.
Yes.
We
Yes.
know that we're getting some kind of accuracy and
Yes.
that sort of thing, but we don't actually know what's happening under the hood. And that's kind of, um, yeah,
I think
that.
that
Mhm.
the one core difference there is like the feedback loop, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
If I build a company and I'm trying to prove that you're allowed to go into a place, and 50% of the time I fail at allowing the right people in, and the other 50% of the time that's too many percent, but like I allow the wrong people in, right? Um, I'm going to get a really heavy feedback loop about that, right? So I have a really directed objective of being correct, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
But it's, yeah,
uh,
but it's not
I don't have
necessarily,
a,
it's
yeah,
not
I don't,
necessarily an adversarial feedback loop though, is it? Because the thing is, if when it's new,
yeah,
what you're really distinguishing is it's all those positive scenarios that you're looking into that you have expected, right, and that you
right,
have planned for. But it's not the stuff. It's not the adversarial stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, and that's the problem, right? Like there is, I can go build a program and say this is one of my favorite things, right? AI, even with like new wave and like enforcement learning and everything that's going on, right? Um, uh, uh, there is no AI right now that is trained to be a therapist. There is no AI right now that understands emotion beyond sentiment ranking and
Right.
like speed and pace of diction, and it can predict whether it thinks you're angry, and that's just a probabilistic curve, right? But it doesn't understand what's going on. It's just tokenizing embeddings and then predicting, right, what it
Hmm.
thinks based on a vector database it should be saying. That's how you have AI that can say, hey, kill yourself, you'll be happier, right? It doesn't even make sense, right? But you have that, but there is no feedback loop to that, right? There
Hmm.
is that person is not necessarily saying, hey, wait a second, let me in here. That person's going, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll kill myself," like hopefully not, but like that's the danger here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so since people don't understand that, uh they I think there's, I talk a lot about in security about the fact that most security breaches source back to someone who thinks they were doing the right thing, who
Hmm.
thinks they were helping the situation, and they were ignorant in how they were helping the situation, right?
Hmm.
And that is, I think, the risk here, where like, this goes very wrong in some direction, and then we're kind of SOL as far as AI.
Yeah. You're also a founding member of PAC.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about PAC?
Sure. So Professional Association of CISOs was set up and is led by some phenomenal CISOs who have been big name CISOs for a long time. I'm lucky to count myself in that group. And we got together and said that there are regulators and other people out there trying to determine what the profession of being a CISO means.
Hmm.
And we do deal with very high risk, very ethically significant things. And
Hmm.
so we should, if people are going to tell us what it means to be a CISO, people who actually are CISOs and know what it means to be a CISO should be doing that. And so we are putting together ways to essentially attest and put CISOs through kind of like a training and testing phase,
Hmm.
and basically producing something akin to medical boards or the bar for lawyers, and basically saying, look, from our perspective, this person acts and behaves and understands and has the characteristics and have proven those to us in a peer review board, that that person knows how to be a CISO. And therefore, if something goes wrong on their watch, it is unlikely that it went wrong because of something they did. It also signs all our members up to a professional code of conduct.
Hmm.
And this code of conduct is much more stringent, akin to being a lawyer, and less like some of the other professional organizations out there that I am a member of that have, like 4 or 5, like, do the right thing, like very like one sentence statements and stuff like
Right.
that. Um, and also it's not, I want to be clear, one, it's to help CISOs, two, it's by CISOs, three, it's to professionalize CISOs, and four, it's not just another cert. Like I have a lot of certs. You can go look at my LinkedIn. Many of those certs, look, I have a lot of knowledge. I'm a knowledgeable guy, but many of those certs are at the end of the day based on I could have walked in, guessed really well on a test, and I could have received the cert, right? I
Hmm.
don't think that's generally what happens, but it's possible.
Hmm.
That's not what we're doing here. This is based on a review of knowledge, verbal tests, basically self-reporting, experience. There's a whole kind of portfolio review that goes into this. This is about, is David CISO material? Has he demonstrated this in the real world? Will other people vouch for this, etc.? It's very different, and again, very akin to like what medical residency is, or having to do like internships in law school and things like that. Like you have to have the experience.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, love it. Okay, and the last question: who is Steve, the tragic hero?
Steve the tragic hero. Oh, Steve is that guy, right? He's the one who's trying to do the right thing. He's the guy who's like, the systems are crashing, my boss is yelling at me, so just shut off the firewall and everything will work, right? That is Steve the tragic hero. He is the guy who stays up late in the middle of the night, works 48 hours straight, pushes out the fix that everyone needs, gets the people who are giving negative feedback to the product to shut up. Meanwhile, North Korea now owns all the code, right? Like that is Steve the tragic hero, and that is he is the source of almost every security incident you've ever heard about, right? Like at the end of the day, AI, again, putting that aside, and that's different and kind of novel in this day and age, but like prior to the last couple of years, code is deterministic. So if it's
Uh-huh.
making the wrong determination, it's because Steve did it, right? It's not the code. The code is not inherently flawed. In most cases, it's because someone hasn't thought of something. Someone rushed. It's all the human frailties, right? And so I think the one of the broad issues in security is that we're told trust, right? Like technology came along and people needed to adopt technology, and so everyone's told trust technology, right? And so we have these like really poor instincts around technology, right? So like looking at downsides is not something we're really good at from a technology perspective. I'm not saying we're good at looking at downsides from a human perspective either. I think there's probably work to be done there, but we especially are terrible at it when it comes to technology, right? I mean, I have T-shirts on me that I own that have jokes on them, like, "Well, it's working on my system." You know what I mean? Like things like that, right? You're like, that phrase shouldn't exist, right? But that's because Steve only did his one golden path test and then was like, "Let's go release some code. What could go wrong?" Right? And that's just the kind of mentality that we need to kind of shift, especially with the more and more technology gets ingrained in our lives. We have to really kind of understand the dangers of it, like anything else we do, right? Like we understand the dangers of driving a car. I'm not saying we don't have car accidents, but like I would reckon to say a lot more people are having cyber accidents than car accidents right now on a daily basis.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that's a great segue to our 12 questions, isn't it?
Yeah, let's do it.
What leads to cyber accidents? This is a really really difficult question. I've put together 12 questions
Yeah.
to kind of get into some of the stuff that's, I would say, widely debated. Talking to different CISOs, talking to different people that are professionals in this space, you get a lot of different opinions about things. So I've put together the questions where people do differ in opinions the most. By the way, I think I've done about 11, 12 of these or something like that. And I am incredibly lazy. And I found out that there are two or three, maybe one or two questions that are not really well phrased, but I haven't been going to be bothered to
That's all right.
fix them yet.
That's
so,
okay.
I will be, might be rephrasing two of them sort of as
That's
we go because it turns out that they just weren't phrased really well. And it takes a little while before we get to what the point of the question actually is. But
gotcha.
anyway, the questions are intentionally framed to be answered in a yes or no format
Hmm.
or an ABC. The
Yep.
reason is when dealing with risk, when dealing with cybersecurity risk, it's a lot of the times it's about setting priorities straight, right? Um, so that's why it's put it this way. However, it's important to understand context. It's important to understand why you lean into a certain way, let's say. And so I would like you to basically choose one of the answers and explain your reasoning behind it, right? That's kind of the
Got it.
way. That's kind of the way we do the format of the session.
Okay.
Okay. Warm up question before we start, just to check that you're actually listening. That you're getting
I'm
the.
still here. I'm with you, David.
If you had to pick between watching a UFC fight or a full game of lacrosse, which one would you go for and why?
Oh, UFC fight. Because look, no plan uh meets the enemy and survives, right? Like, I think um there are so many. We really celebrate stories in sports that are, unlikely, but I think there are so many more stories in combat oriented sports that
Mm-hmm.
are truly unlikely,
Mm-hmm.
because there is almost a infinite set of circumstances to
Mm-hmm.
account for,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is in the moment, kind of reacting. And the reality is, it's, you're asking me from a cyber perspective. I put it this way: where will I learn more about like the team and the people I'm dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
in doing a tabletop or dealing with an actual acute hacking incident? I'm going to learn a lot more in that acute hacking incident about people.
Right. Right.
Um, and I think that's look, it's a brutal, combat sports are brutal, but there is nothing at the end of the day, and there is like kind of like no blame game either, right? It's like
Yep.
it's you, and you're
Yep.
either winning or losing, and there's really nothing else
Yeah.
going on, right?
I guess the fact, like,
um
that's the whole point of UFC is there's this. They made it to have as little rules as possible while still being somewhat safe, right? That's kind of
yeah,
the way it was designed,
yes,
right?
yes.
That's kind of what makes it fascinating and a very good. Um, it does. it is different in that to any other sport in the world, I guess.
Yes.
Is it you get so many different outcomes and so many different situations that you wouldn't basically have even thought of, which is um exactly what cybersecurity is like, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that um, at the end of the day, that's what's coming at you, right? And so I think that like um, I'm a believer in the fact that I- I force my this is a weird weird about myself, but like um if there's like a movie, a show I'm uncomfortable, I'm afraid of, I'm whatever, some
Hmm.
activity, something like that,
Hmm.
I force myself to
To go
do
through
it.
it. Okay.
And that's not like some like weird
Yeah.
say masochistic thing. It's more of like, look, the reality of life is you are going to be hit with circumstances you do not want to be in.
Hmm.
And that is most likely going to have a deterministic effect on a long period of your life, how you kind of weather that. And so to me, I think that being able to test your metal and know that you can kind of survive the brutality when it comes
Hmm.
is like a really important characteristic. And it's something I also try to like instill, but my kids are a little too young for like UFC, but like I try to instill into my kids of like,
Right in.
look, you're afraid of going and doing this thing. Like
Yeah.
you have to, now I'm going to like, you might hate me for this, but I'm going to, in a gentle way, make you go do that thing that you just told me you hate.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a professor in college who literally did the same thing to me.
Hmm.
And it was a very interesting experience. And she was right. Sometimes you find that once you get past the fear, you actually love what's
Yeah.
beyond the fear, and you're actually like you're really good at it, or you're really resilient in it, and et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really, really good advice, and I think well needed advice actually, especially when talking about thinking about parenting. Uh,
Yeah,
very, very relevant to me right now.
yeah,
I've been thinking about stuff like this a lot lately.
yeah.
And then yeah, this is actually um, and I don't know, maybe this is kind of like one of those like good old days type of reactions, but I think like it's easy to there's less well it's easy for kids to grow up without any danger basically like
Yes,
right it's just that the way um things have developed, which is great, is um it's the risks of the health risks,
yes,
early child death, right? All of that
yep,
is going down dramatically in the last 100 years all over the world, which
yes.
is amazing. But then there's also the psychological aspect for children growing up in in that environment, and for parents learning to cope with that and adjusting. But anyway, that's another
No,
story.
no, that so I know we have our questions, but really quickly, the world is a very safe place, much safer than it was 100 years ago, right? But we've done a lot to do that. And one of the most interesting pieces of advice I ever like got or heard was, I can't give specifics here, but someone who was in a very kind of unique position, um, uh, dealing with like very dangerous, very serious stuff, and he woke up one morning and he read like an article, and again, the world's a safe place, and his thought was like, oh well, okay, that's terrible, but like there's someone to deal with that. And then like the story goes, he's like, oh my god, I'm the someone who has to deal with that, right? Like, and so to me, I always tell people now, like I'm like, to me that was very profound. I'm like, you may wake up one day and find that you are the someone who has to deal with it, right? So like
Mhm.
you need to be able to kind of put yourself in those positions and have kind of practice reps, for
Mhm.
lack of a better way of doing it, before that you find yourself in that actual position and going like, oh God, I've never been in you don't want to be I've never been in that position before, like when it really, really matters, right? Because
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
then you're like, uh-oh, like what do I do, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Not a great time to try it for the first time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
All right. So let's get to the questions.
yep,
First question is centered around BYOD and managed devices. This is still a widely debated topic.
yep,
Should as an organization, especially by the way, like these questions when we're talking when we're thinking about these questions, think about it from a perspective of SMBs, right? Like as if
yeah.
you were to give advice to SMBs, what would you sort of kind of tell them to do? BYOD versus managed devices. You see different opinions on this. Is it better to have a robust BYOD policy, or would you say no, lock it down, sort of a thing? Only allow managed devices to access resources no matter what. What's your approach? What's your vote?
So I would say I'm 95. I'm a managed devices, just managed devices. I've seen nightmare scenarios with BYOD. I've seen nightmare scenarios with managed devices. Um, and David, are you frozen?
No, I'm not. But I think I do see you.
Anyway,
But it may be one of those. It may be
oh,
one of
okay.
those. Oh no, it's fine. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm here. I was
All
just
right.
I was like listening. I was really listening.
So the managed devices, like, look, people do wild things even on managed devices. Um, BYOD, there is no way to make BYOD devices clean. Um, I think context to that is like, what are you handling with BYOD devices? What data are you handling? Um, how important is it for an SMB? And then I think the other context is like, what's the reality, right? Like, um, I don't, I'm not a big believer in making everyone walk around with like a second phone in their hand. But I also think it's like, what are you doing on your phone? If you're doing like, you're answering sales emails and things like that, cool. If you're going to transfer millions of dollars in bank accounts, let's get you a phone, right? Right? Like it doesn't cost that much money to get you an iPhone, right? Like, so I think that's kind of like the other context of it. But in general, especially for laptops where people tend to do the weirdest, gnarliest like exploration and things, you see enough bad stuff on managed devices. I am horrified to think what people are doing on BYOD devices. And
Mhm.
it's like, if you have, 5 people in your company who are really tech savvy, who you trust and are like really good on the internet and stuff, sure. But like, show me that company, right? Like that they don't exist. So,
Right.
someone there is, like, again, the stuff I've seen on managed devices, the fact that people can work for like a company that has 200,000 employees and think that the laptop we handed them is like their own personal do whatever box is like insane to me. And that's when it is managed, right? So it's only going to go from there. And I think if you really want to do something like that, and you want to give people like, the other thing you could do is give people like throwaway devices too. If, there was one particular company I worked with where they, part of their tech stipend was they would offer to buy people a personal Chromebook.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a cheaper solution than being like, don't ruin the laptop we gave you. Here's like a $300 Chromebook. It's yours to keep. Do whatever the hell you want on that.
Mhm.
Use this only for work.
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. Um, Kind of the cybersecurity mantra is cyber is not about tech; it's about people, process, technology. Now, thinking about this from a perspective of priorities and thinking about this from a perspective of SMBs, which one would you say SMBs need to focus on the most? Where should they invest the most energy? Should it be people, process, or technology?
It's always process. It's 100% process. Process is the number one neglected thing in business. I don't know how else to explain it. At some point, people decided buying a tool will supplant having to have a process. It just patently never works. It's like I always tell people I can go to Home Depot and buy all the tools in the world. If I don't know anything about electricity, I'm gonna fail at rewiring my house and probably burn it down, even though I've bought all these fancy tools, right? And that's the bottom line. Um, Everything starts with process, and it's really interesting. Um, it really should go in a mature organization, it's like process, tools, people. In a less mature organization, it's process, people, tools.
Hmm.
Um, because it's setting the processes, setting the example of the process, and then you have the tools to engineer the process. Um, and oftentimes, too, you see, especially in small businesses, companies buy tools, they can't implement them, can't integrate them, where a pen and paper solution would have sufficed.
Hmm.
And it's small enough to execute that pen and paper solution at scale because there's only 50 or 100 employees. And so, like, you know, have someone putting in a ticket to get access to someone and someone manually giving them access because there's only 50 people. So there's not going to be like thousands and thousands of access requests every day is perfectly acceptable.
Hmm.
And so that's 100% my vote. I can go
Okay,
deeper into that, but yeah, that's process wins the day.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, looking at sort of the cybersecurity from another perspective, prevention and response are also one of those things that you get different opinions on this. Some people tell you master prevention first. Some people tell you master response first. What's your opinion on this?
Oh God. Can I triple vote for prevention? Is that possible? Look, I
I
mean,
think you just did.
the days of response are like, look, uh detection and response is a necessary evil, but the reality is in most events when we have detected and responded, we're already late and we're already damaged in a significant way. Our ability to detect and respond is generally very poor. And we can automate and do automated detection and response in places, but those places become commoditized, and then attackers move on to the places that aren't, right? So it's a question of, when I talk to people about this, I go, would you rather have a lock on your front door, or would you rather have Steve try to run
Oh,
and
here we go.
shove his body up against the door when someone comes to break it, right? Like, I'd rather have the lock. I don't know about you.
Why
And
do,
so,
why does it
you
have to
know,
be Steve again?
listen,
Poor,
Steve.
poor freaking guy.
If I ever write a book, Steve will be in the title. I can't guarantee it. But I mean, like, it doesn't make sense, right? Someone running around and slamming windows shut, it's not a realistic strategy. Um, do you need the police to come and investigate after the bad thing has happened? Absolutely. Do you need to figure out how to prevent that in the future? Absolutely. But 90%, if not 80% of what you're focused on in a security program should ultimately be on prevention. I think we get stuck in the response cycle because people walk into companies and they start seeing all the things that are terrible. And the other metaphor I use, which is vivid, is um, if you walk in, and maybe you're not meant to be a CISO, if you walk into a room and you see a patient bleeding out on the table, and your instinct is to start mopping up the blood on the ground, you're not going to be very effective, right? You have to go stop the bleeding, right? But the blood is in front of you and there's a mop there, and there's an instinct to go like, oh my God, I should clean this up. Like, this is bad. There shouldn't be blood on the floor, right? And so I think it's very hard for people to kind of fight that instinct. So they tend to over rotate on the response. So then you go from like mopping the blood to like, maybe I can catch the blood. Maybe I can put the blood back. Like, none of that is stopping the problem, right?
Yeah.
And that goes back to process. I think, like, it's, one of the hallmarks of leadership is knowing that your job is not to fix things. It's not to, execute things. Those are features of your job, but your job is actually to find the problem, find the solution and implement it so the problem goes away, so it stays fixed, right? And that is a truly hard thing to do, because that means you're going to have to kind of slog through some blood on the floor every once in a while.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thinking about prevention, what's a better way to do that? Is it through educating about cybersecurity, or is it through implementing the right tech?
Um, do okay. Education, but with a huge caveat.
Hmm.
So education in all the ways of not meaning security awareness training.
Okay, that's
Security,
usually a follow-up question, by the way. So
yeah.
thank you for getting into that right away.
So again, we have really bad instincts. Giving someone a 2-hour training a year is not going to change 20 years of bad instincts of trusting the internet. However, teaching developers to understand how a hacker thinks, and then therefore how to develop to counter how a hacker thinks, can be very effective, because developers put their self in the mindset of thinking through contracts and how to talk to an API and what are the rules of play and how does a language structure. So if you can give them another set of rules essentially to follow, that they have to basically grok into variables into like their code, right? Like, I'm being very blase in my description. I come from a development background, so don't yell at me, developers. But like, um, it is another language, another framework to decode for them, and can be very successful in having them build proactively code where the windows are shut and the doors are locked, and you don't have to worry about stuff coming in
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm.
Um, but the general awareness training is broken. I still think education is the answer there
Hmm.
long term. I don't think we have the right tech or approach right
Hmm.
now to do that.
Hmm.
The idea that tech is going to somehow stop Steve from trying to be the tragic hero, you don't know how dogged Steve is. He will find a way to do the bad thing unless he knows not to do it.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
And I see that all the time. Right.
I've noticed you talk a lot about instinct.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. I mean, thinking about this from an educational perspective, but just thinking about cybersecurity in general, um, I guess the heaviness of um, experience, right, in some way, instinct or fast thinking, and how that reflects onto everything we do, right? And that's whether it's coding or whether it's stupid um mistakes that people
Yeah.
do. Um, it's really interesting how what role instinct plays in that, because that's really what's driving a lot of this, right? Because it's usually fast thinking, reactional, get something done fast without double checking or something like that, and that's where the mistakes happen, right?
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, next topic: ransomware. It is a thing that's been like, at least the numbers are saying it's the
Yep.
thing that's kind of the big problem right now. It's been a growing problem over the years, both in terms of percentage of successful breaches and also the total numbers. Um, Now the question is, I think we have touched on this a little bit, but if you feel like you have something to add to this, do you think the way to fight ransomware is through using existing tech better, or do we need some sort of technological innovation to do it better, basically?
We need some sort of innovation where um, we need to be in a state where someone can attack us with ransomware and we go, okay.
Hmm.
It's like someone like port scanning. We're like, cool, you did that. I have a firewall. Good for you. You know ports are open. Enjoy. Like, I know they're open too. I'm good. Um, until we get to that state, we're going to be in a constant. It's just too profitable, and it's often too easy, because a lot of times we can just have Steve make a mistake, and we don't have systems to intervene. I think there's some interesting tech that has emerged that's slowly getting some adoption. That probably should be getting some faster adoption. There's two companies in particular.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not going to name drop on the podcast, but like people can Google like specific new wave like like
Mm-hmm.
anti-ransomware companies that are out there. Um, and we need to find a way to basically be able to kind of just stop it, right? I think we've tried not paying the ransom, we've tried paying the ransom, we've tried uh doing backups and rehydrating. We know backups and resiliency have their own issues. I can get into that too. um we need to be able to commoditize this away like a firewall. And I don't think someone has figured it out. And until they do, I think this is just something we're going to have to live with for a while, which is unfortunate, but that's the reality that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Now, in case you don't have any of those like new tools that you're talking about, and maybe let's say for the sake of the argument that you haven't done your backups, you're uh, an organization that was just hit with ransomware, and it's not a good situation. What would you advise the organization to do? Should they pay or not pay?
They should negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whether or not they pay often becomes a business decision
Mm-hmm.
um, around how much they're paying. They should always negotiate, though. You might learn something.
Mm-hmm.
You might figure out that this person actually doesn't want to negotiate. They don't really want a ransom. You
Mm-hmm.
buy yourself time and allow yourself to find out more details about what you're dealing with. Um, and then ultimately, whether you pay or not, I think there are some people. Look, there was a rash of kidnapping and ransoms that rose in the 90s with international travel. Those got a lot worse when insurance for KNR came around and people realized that the insurance would pay. We have cyber insurance. Cyber insurance pays ransomware sometimes. Um, the government has said pay, don't pay. They've gone in different directions. I think a lot of it's really situational, and I think it's about like knowing what's going to happen if you do pay. Like knowing that if you pay, someone else or that same actor may strike again. You're now seen as someone who will pay. However, if paying $6 million is going to let you continue running a $7 billion company, I don't know. You probably pay $6 million for a lot of other things that are less critical, right? So again, then it comes down to like basic risk metrics and like, but I think people really should just know what they're doing. And I think the one thing they should not do is, I said that in an awkward way, so I'm going to rephrase that. Contact law enforcement in
Mm-hmm.
most jurisdictions, in most countries, especially in Europe and US and most of Asia, quite honestly, contact law enforcement. Most countries, law enforcement, um, they will help. They
Mm-hmm.
will not tell you you can or can't pay. They
Mm-hmm.
will not intervene or override what you're doing. They will help, and they will also be a source of intelligence because you may be one of 20 companies dealing with that adversary at the same time right now. So they
Mm-hmm.
might be able to tell you, like, yeah, they said you have to pay by Friday, but you know what? No one's paying by Friday. So, like, and no one has for the last 6 months. So you actually have like 4 weeks before this becomes like, so like you'll find stuff
Right.
out.
Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Thank you. Um, I'm gonna skip over the next question.
Okay.
You talked about ransomware. Governments telling you to pay and then not pay, and that they're changing their mind about this. Another one of these another example where standards change about what's the right way of doing things has to do with password policy. Unauthorized use of credentials is still uh, the number one action variety based on the Verizon data breach report. It shows up, any report you look at, it shows us, okay, credentials. Again, it was the thing that was that an action step taken by the adversary when realizing a successful breach. And when it comes to password policies, there's difference in opinions about um, how often the password should be changed. changed, if it should ever be changed, right? I mean, we can speculate about what else you can do. This is not to talk about passwordless or other, controls you should have in place, but it's just looking at passwords themselves. What's your opinion? How frequently should they be changed to ensure maximum security?
So when I think in an ideal world, we get rid of passwords, but let's put that aside. uh, I think that it's really about password length. I think most passwords are just acutely too short. Originally, passwords were short because of storage limitations in systems. People don't realize that. The reason a password was like 6 characters or 8 characters was not because that's good. It's because that's what fit. We have unlimited storage now. People should be using passphrases. There's been a number of studies that show that using a 16 plus character passphrase, that's usually a collection of meaningless words together that someone else, maybe you put in a letter or some other variant, is much harder to crack than even all kind of just arbitrary characters that's 8 characters long, right? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
about the space of having to rotate through different combinations and things like that. um so I actually am a big believer in, like, if you have like a 24 character password, you should probably never change that password. Just know that password. um the interesting thing I'm about to say is, after a breach where that password has been exposed, you should rotate it. And I'm going to be realistic. In the best case scenario, maybe you're not reusing that password, but you're probably making variants of that password, because humans are not good at remembering 250 passwords. And as much as I'd love everyone to use password managers, I use them. They don't always work well, and people are slow to adopt things. And sometimes you just need to get into certain systems frequently and things like that. Um, so I think that at the end of the day, don't rotate passwords. If there's a breach, try to rotate your password. But my call to this is, companies, if you know passwords have been breached, tell people sooner than 10
Yeah,
months
never.
after it happens, right? Otherwise, it doesn't really matter if they rotate then. That password has been sprayed onto all kinds of services already anyway. So it like, you're past the point of mattering at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it totally does. Yeah. Now you mentioned you're reusing passwords. This is another thing that happens a lot. People are given a password, they're told not to do it, but they do it anyway, right? In case this happens, they use it on another service. That service gets hacked, and then that leads to a breach. Um, whose fault is it? Is it the company's fault that they haven't somehow um, uh, made it clear enough, usually, or do you think it's typically the person that just then they were well trained, were told what not to do, they signed the contract, but they did it anyway? What's your experience in this?
I look, I'm a believe it's the person's fault. Like, it is. Um, we tell people all kinds of stuff they should do. People ignore me as a CISO all day long. Like, not me personally, but like the general populace. We tell people all the time, don't share specific personal details on social sites and things like that. Like, we educate people that can help hackers. And yet I see people constantly like, going back to identity proofing, like, look, I got my new passport, and like put it up on like Facebook or Twitter, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, right. And so I think that there are definitely things that as a company we can try to do to help mitigate and tell our customers, like, look, we're going to make our password lengths longer, we're going to try to look for weak passwords. We can try to do all that, but at the end of the day, Steve's going to Steve. And if like, we can't control for every person and the actions they choose to take. So I think that goes back to having some instincts. Um, I think it's the credit card companies have interesting rules that are always interesting to me. And I think that people, um, you know, look, a credit card company will cover like the theft or loss of a credit card if you report it in a timely manner, if you're
Mhm.
responsible about doing it. If you're not, they say, sorry, you lost your credit card a month ago, and I understand there's $10,000 of charges, but you didn't tell us and give us an opportunity to do anything, right?
Yep.
And so I think there is a balance between those two, and I think
Mm-hmm.
um, pushing everything back onto uh, companies is not really fair. Like if you as a user have bad cyber hygiene, there's not like a lot I can do for you,
Yep.
right? Like I just I can if I have 20 million users. How do I,
Yep.
you know, I already have strapped resources as it is. Every CISO does. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's what this is about, right? I do want to ask you two more questions. That are more about, I guess, buzzwords or trends
sure,
that have been happening recently,
yeah,
not so
let's do
recently,
it.
in the cyber world. First one is zero trust. Zero trust to you, is it more of a buzzword, or do you see that as a really an innovative and a critical, let's say, piece of knowledge, uh, or a concept that you just advocate for and recommend SMBs to follow?
Uh, so zero trust is interesting. I think the theory of zero trust is where the world needs to head. I
Hmm.
think we need to look at zero trust approaches, speaking to theory,
Hmm.
in more domains of security. I
Hmm.
think actually implementing zero trust is a very thorny thing. However, the world has changed significantly in the last 2 years. And I think that many of the challenges we've had with zero trust in the next 5 years will be solved. And we may be able to get to it. I think
Hmm.
the current issues with implementation are because we are, the theory of zero trust is built to combat 40 years of bad habits around
Hmm.
things like access management that, look, the first cyber tool ever built in the 70s was meant to fix access management. I don't think we fixed it. So, it's a chronic battle. So I think the theory, good. Implementation's been very buzzy, tends to be very thorny. It takes a lot of work and effort, especially as an SMB. And I think it's really hard to go zero trust too with less mature tools as an SMB.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's going to change in the next years. So I think it's something we should not look at as a buzzword, at least not anymore. I think it's something that can become real.
Hmm. Okay. The other buzzword or the other trend is AI. We talked a little bit about this earlier on.
Of course,
Um,
yes.
do you expect everything that's been going on, like most of the innovations that are happening in, ML, AI, whatever, do you see that it's going to help more what you've been seeing, or do you think there's going to be more um, adversarial actions, and where is that? How's that going to meet in the cybersecurity world? Do you think it's going to help cybersecurity more, or is it going to help the adversaries more, basically?
So I think, oh, this is interesting. I think in the immediate future, and we've already seen some of it, I think it's going to help adversaries.
Hmm.
Um, I think that adversaries tend to be early adopters compared to many security and enterprise risk organizations. However, I think that AI is going to enable us to make certain thorny problems we've had for years in
Hmm.
cyber
Hmm.
be commoditized like firewalls, right?
Hmm.
When's the last time? I'm not saying there isn't firewall misconfiguration, but when is the last time you heard someone actually breach a
Hmm.
firewall? They're
Hmm.
not breaching a firewall. They're
Hmm.
going through what's already open in the firewall. They're not opening stuff in the firewall. It's
Hmm.
binary.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I think we're gonna start seeing similar avenues in other places.
Hmm.
But I think it's gonna take, let's say, 2 to 5 years to get there. And I think for those 2 to 5 years, we're going to see adversaries be able to attack in volumes and that we haven't seen, and in unique ways that we haven't seen. Like,
Hmm.
I am shocked here. Maybe someone will listen to this and write it. I am shocked. I have not read in the past 2 months an article about like vibe hacking or something, right? Like, yeah, and to be frank, it exists. Like, there are engines where you can say like, go find me a way into this URL, and it will like return like an active exploit and
Mm,
potentially a backdoor, right?
mm,
That exists. I've seen that on the white hat side. So if
mhm.
I've seen that on the white hat side, that means that's existed probably for a year on the black hat side, right? So I think that's you know, we are there. And this goes back to that prevention element, right? If you
Mhm.
have the lock on the door, it doesn't matter, how many keys I try if I don't have the right key. I know lock picking, everyone get mad at me. This metaphor might not hold up, but like the idea being like,
Yep.
again, if the code is built securely,
Mhm.
the idea that throwing AI at it and trying 100,000 ways to make it insecure, it's not going to find some novel, like magical new way to make it insecure.
Right, right,
Um, but it will find the things you've failed to prevent at a
right.
much more rapid pace than historically we've seen.
Mhm. Yep. Perfect. Thanks so much, Peter. That's it for the 12 questions. Um,
Thank you.
I do want to ask you one last thing,
Sure.
which is if you could give one piece of advice to mostly SMB owners. I think when it comes to cybersecurity strategy, cybersecurity culture, it has to start with owners. It has to start with C level, right? So that's why I want to ask you if you could give those guys a piece of advice as to what they should, um, how they should think about cybersecurity, and if there's one thing that they should do and change based on your experience, what would that be?
I'm going to take a tiny bit of latitude with this answer and kind of combine a couple of things.
Hmm.
Um, I think often CISOs and security operators, I'll get to that something. Hang on. Think that we are war fighters, right? Going back to our UFC question at the beginning. And I think some of that comes from the mentality of like where some of this came from originally, from government, from bank breaches, things like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
The reality is a CISO's job, a security operator's job in a company, is to be a bodyguard to that company. That company is walking through a war zone being shot at. And it is our job to make sure they get through that war zone and meet their objectives without getting shot, right? Um, I say that to SMB owners because you are in that war zone and you are getting shot at. And the fact that a bullet hasn't lodged in the back of your head so far is obscurity or sheer luck. That is the bottom line, because even obscurity is not a protector anymore. So my number one advice to any SMB is start your security journey today. Um, the earlier you start it, the less it costs, the easier it is, and the less likely you are to one day end up getting shot. And if you do get shot, maybe you get shot in the foot, not fatally, right? Um, but that is the reality. And so I think that if I use that metaphor because if I am an SMB owner, often the idea is like, well, I don't have money for that, right? But if I told you that you were going to go run through a field of people shooting back and forth, and I said, you can spend money on potentially making this look pretty, right? Or doing this other thing, or I could buy you body armor. I think you'd rather I buy you body armor than I throw a couple pots and pans at you and go, good luck, right? And I think that we often see that. And then we often see companies start to kind of take security literally and kind of mature when they kind of get a couple of flesh wounds,
Hmm.
right? But at the point where you've gotten a couple of flesh wounds, now you need surgery, you need recovery, you have to go buy even more expensive, but like, so security is a foundational thing. I know I'm mixing metaphors, but my last thing to say is I don't know any business owner who's successful who doesn't operate with a budget and actually look at ROI and earnings and making sure that the company functions financially and has to pay bills at the end of the month and do accounting. And having, been and exited two startups, having been small and lean and having to do some of those things hands on myself early in my career and stuff. I'm not saying I like accounting, but you do it. It's the same thing with security. It is a foundational part of operating a business these days. And if you're not doing it, you're neglecting your business.
All right. Thank you. I have to
Yeah.
say, I am a little surprised that Steve didn't show up in that answer in some way.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I think you have to work on that one.
Steve's the guy who's handing you like a china plate, being like, "It'll be fine. Just run with that." So he's there. Don't worry. He'll find his way.
Find a way.
Yeah.
All right, man. Okay, well, thank you again for giving us your answers for
Yeah.
the 12 questions. I think there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight that you shared today. That's definitely worth listening to. We will be doing other types of sessions with CyberOinks. So I've had a blast today. It was really interesting, really insightful. If you're open to it, I'd definitely love to have you on CyberOinks at some point in the future.
Yeah. I would like to say, David, thank you. This has been great. I had a blast today as well, and I'd love to be on in the future. And uh, I encourage everyone else to come and answer the 12 questions too, because I think this is a lot of fun and I think it matters.
All right, man. Thank you. That's great to hear. And so I'll be seeing you in a future episode.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks, David.
All right, man.